Some of the most incredible places in human history were never supposed to be forgotten. An ancient temple hidden beneath the streets of London, a lost city buried under the sea, a mountain cave filled with thousands of human bones, giant stone towers that nobody can fully explain, royal tombs hidden beneath desert cliffs, and entire civilizations that vanished so completely that history almost erased them forever. What's fascinating is that these aren't legends, they're real places, real discoveries made by archaeologists who uncovered evidence of worlds that most people have never even heard of. Before we begin, let me know in comments where you're watching from and what time it is where you are right now, and if you enjoy ancient mysteries, lost civilizations and forgotten history, be sure to subscribe. Now, let's uncover the hidden places that time almost managed to erase. The ancient temple, hidden beneath a modern city. Beneath the busy streets of London, hidden below office buildings, traffic and millions of daily footsteps, lies the remains of a temple that was never meant to be forgotten. For nearly 2,000 years it slept beneath the city, buried by time, covered by centuries of construction, its existence erased from memory. Then, during the chaos of rebuilding after World War II, workers made an astonishing discovery. They uncovered an ancient Roman temple hidden beneath one of the world's most modern cities, a temple dedicated to a mysterious god known as Mithras, and even today, its secrets continue to fascinate archaeologists. The story begins during Roman Britain. Nearly 2,000 years ago, London was known as Londinium. It was one of the most important cities in the Roman Empire's northern frontier. Merchants filled its streets, soldiers guarded its walls, ships arrived carrying goods from across the ancient world. The city was growing rapidly, and with growth came religion. The Romans worshipped many gods. Some were famous throughout the empire, others belonged to secretive religious groups known as mystery cults. One of the most mysterious was the cult of Mithras. Very little is known about its beliefs. Its ceremonies were conducted in private. Its members guarded their secrets carefully, and unlike many religions, they left behind few written explanations. What archaeologists know today comes mostly from temples and artifacts discovered across the former Roman world. Among those discoveries, few are as famous as the London Mithraeum. The temple was originally built during the 3rd century AD near a small stream called the Walbrook. At the time, this area sat within the heart of Roman Londinium. But unlike grand public temples dedicated to major gods, Mithraea were designed to feel different. Dark, enclosed, almost cave-like. The followers of Mithras believed their god had a special connection to caves and hidden places. As a result, many temples were built underground or designed to resemble underground chambers. The London Mithraeum followed this tradition. Visitors entering the temple would have descended into a dimly lit sacred space. Rows of benches lined the sides. Altars stood at the centre. Oil lamps flickered against stone walls. Religious ceremonies unfolded in secrecy. Only initiated members were allowed inside. No one knows exactly what happened during those rituals. That mystery remains unsolved. One of the most important symbols of Mithraism appears in nearly every temple dedicated to the god, a scene showing Mithras killing a sacred bull. Known as the tauroctony, the image appears repeatedly throughout the Roman world. Yet its meaning remains debated. Some scholars believe it represented creation, others connect it to astronomy. The truth may never be known. The followers of Mithras left behind symbols, not explanations, and that uncertainty only adds to the mystery. For centuries the temple served its community. Then Rome's influence in Britain began to fade. The empire weakened, political power shifted, new religions spread across Europe. Eventually the temple was abandoned. The stream changed course, buildings collapsed, layer after layer of history buried the site. The city above continued growing. Medieval London appeared, then Tudor London, then Victorian London, all without knowing what rested beneath the ground. The temple remained hidden for nearly 16 centuries. Then came 1954. Workers clearing a bomb-damaged area after World War II uncovered ancient walls. Archaeologists rushed to investigate. What they discovered captured worldwide attention. Crowds gathered to watch the excavation. Newspapers reported the findings. For a brief moment, ancient Londinium emerged from beneath modern London. The discovery became one of Britain's most famous archaeological events. Excavations uncovered statues, inscriptions, pottery, and pieces of the temple itself. Each artifact offered a glimpse into a forgotten religious world. Yet many questions remained unanswered. Who worshipped here? What rituals took place inside? Why was Mithra so popular among Roman soldiers and merchants? The evidence provided clues, not certainty. Years later, parts of the temple were carefully reconstructed and preserved. Today, visitors can once again descend beneath London's streets and stand near the remains of the ancient sanctuary. Above them rises one of the world's busiest financial districts. Below lies a hidden chapter of Roman history, a reminder that beneath every modern city may rest countless forgotten stories. The London Mithraeum is not the largest Roman temple ever discovered, nor the richest. But few archaeological sites capture the imagination quite like it. A secret temple buried beneath a modern metropolis, a sanctuary dedicated to one of history's most mysterious religions, and proof that sometimes the greatest discoveries are hiding directly beneath our feet. Beneath the streets of London, the ancient temple still waits, silent, hidden, and filled with mysteries that survived nearly 2,000 years. The ancient skull that shows signs of surgery. Thousands of years before modern hospitals, before anesthesia, before medical schools, and long before anyone understood bacteria or infection. Someone picked up a stone tool and performed a surgical procedure that should have been impossible. Not on an animal, not on a body after death, but on a living human being. And remarkably, the patient appears to have survived. The evidence comes from ancient skulls discovered across the world. Skulls bearing carefully cut holes created through a procedure known as trepanation, one of the oldest and most mysterious forms of surgery ever practiced by humanity. At first glance, the skulls are shocking. Circular openings appear in the bone, some are small, others surprisingly large. The cuts look deliberate, precise, intentional. For early archaeologists, the discoveries seemed almost unbelievable. How could prehistoric people perform such procedures thousands of years before modern medicine existed? The mystery only deepened as more examples were uncovered. Ancient trepanned skulls have been found in Europe, South America, Africa, Asia, and the Middle East. The practice appears to have been widespread. Different cultures, different continents, different eras, yet somehow many arrived at the same extraordinary idea: opening the human skull. Some examples date back more than 7,000 years. That means people were performing cranial surgery long before written history began, long before cities existed in many parts of the world, and long before anyone would expect such medical knowledge to appear. The most astonishing detail is what happened afterward. Many skulls show clear signs of healing. New bone growth formed around the openings. This indicates the individual survived the operation, sometimes for months, sometimes for years. Imagine what that means. A person undergoing skull surgery with stone tools and living long enough for the bone to heal. It remains one of archaeology's most remarkable discoveries. But why were these procedures performed? That question continues to puzzle researchers. Some believe trepanation was used to treat head injuries. Ancient people may have noticed that removing damaged bone helped relieve pressure after trauma. Others think the procedure addressed chronic headaches, seizures, or neurological conditions. There is another possibility as well: religion. Many ancient cultures believed illness could be caused by spirits or supernatural forces. Creating an opening in the skull may have been seen as a way to release those forces from the body. The truth may involve all of these explanations. Different cultures likely practiced trepanation for different reasons. One famous example comes from the Andes Mountains of Peru. Archaeologists discovered numerous skulls showing evidence of trepanation. Some belonged to warriors who had suffered serious head wounds. Remarkably, survival rates in certain ancient Peruvian populations appear surprisingly high. In some cases, researchers estimate that more patients survived these procedures than early surgical patients in parts of Europe centuries later. The skill involved is difficult to ignore. Ancient practitioners clearly understood more than many people assume. They knew where to cut, how much bone to remove, and perhaps most importantly, how to avoid immediately killing the patient. That knowledge must have been passed down through generations, learned through experience, refined over centuries. Yet the people who possessed it left behind few explanations. Their techniques vanished with time. Only the skulls remain, silent witnesses to forgotten medical knowledge. The discoveries challenge one of the most common assumptions about the ancient world: that prehistoric people were primitive, that they lacked sophisticated understanding. Trepanation tells a different story, a story of observation, experimentation, and a willingness to attempt procedures that seem astonishing even today. Eventually, the civilizations that practiced these surgeries disappeared. Their villages were abandoned, their traditions faded, their names were forgotten. But buried beneath the earth, the evidence survived. Thousands of years later, archaeologists uncovered the skulls and revealed a chapter of human history almost no one expected. Today, trepanation remains one of archaeology's greatest medical mysteries, a practice older than recorded history, a procedure performed without modern technology, and proof that ancient people were often far more capable than we imagine. Hidden inside ancient graves around the world are skulls bearing impossible scars, evidence of surgery before medicine, a mystery carved into bone, and one of humanity's oldest medical achievements. The lost city revealed by laser scans. For centuries, the dense jungles of Central America concealed one of archaeology's greatest secrets. Beneath thick forests, tangled vegetation, and towering trees lay the remains of entire cities. Roads, temples, pyramids, reservoirs, and millions of structures hidden so completely that nobody could see them. Not from the ground, not from the air. It seemed as if the jungle had erased an entire civilization. Then a new technology changed everything. A technology capable of seeing through the forest itself, and what it revealed shocked the world. The discovery began with LiDAR, short for light detection and ranging. The technology works by firing hundreds of thousands of laser pulses toward the ground from aircraft flying above the jungle. Most of the pulses bounce off leaves and branches, but some reach the earth below. When researchers remove the vegetation digitally, a hidden landscape suddenly appears. And in the Maya world, that hidden landscape was astonishing. What archaeologists saw looked less like isolated ruins and more like an enormous interconnected civilization. Entire cities emerged from the darkness. Massive pyramids appeared where no one knew they existed. Road systems stretched across the forest. Terraces covered hillsides. Defensive walls surrounded settlements. The scale was almost impossible to comprehend. For generations, many historians believed Maya cities were relatively isolated. Large ceremonial centers separated by vast stretches of wilderness. LiDAR revealed something completely different. The jungle had been filled with people, millions of them, connected through networks of roads, agriculture, and infrastructure. One of the most remarkable discoveries came from northern Guatemala. Researchers scanned thousands of square kilometers of rainforest and uncovered more than 60,000 previously unknown structures. The number was staggering. Everywhere the lasers looked, new features appeared. Hidden temples, platforms, canals, fortifications. The forest seemed to be hiding an entire world. Some of the newly discovered cities were enormous. Monumental pyramids rose above ancient plazas. Causeways connected distant settlements. Water management systems demonstrated sophisticated engineering. The Maya were not simply surviving in the jungle, they were reshaping it, transforming the landscape on a massive scale. One mystery that emerged from the scans involves population. The discoveries suggest that far more people lived in the Maya region than previously believed, perhaps millions more. Entire landscapes were carefully managed to support agriculture. Terraces climbed hillsides, wetlands were modified, resources were controlled with extraordinary precision. The Maya world may have been one of the most densely populated regions on Earth during certain periods of its history. The implications were enormous. Archaeologists suddenly had to rethink centuries of assumptions. The technology also revealed extensive defensive systems, walls, fortifications, protected boundaries. These discoveries suggest that warfare may have played a larger role in Maya history than many once believed. Ancient cities were not always peaceful ceremonial centers. Some were heavily defended strongholds preparing for conflict. The lasers uncovered evidence hidden for over 1,000 years. Perhaps the most fascinating aspect of LiDAR is that it continues producing discoveries. Every new survey reveals something unexpected. Previously unknown cities emerge from the digital maps. Ancient roads appear where nobody expected them. The technology has transformed archaeology into something resembling exploration once again. Entire chapters of history are still waiting beneath the forest canopy. One reason these discoveries are so important is that they remind us how much remains hidden. The Maya civilization was one of the most advanced societies in the ancient Americas. Its people built monumental architecture, developed writing, created sophisticated calendars, and established powerful kingdoms. Yet even after centuries of study, researchers are still finding major cities that nobody knew existed. The jungle preserved their secrets remarkably well. Eventually, many Maya cities were abandoned. Populations declined. Temples fell into ruin. Trees grew through plazas and over pyramids. The forests slowly reclaimed everything. For centuries, the lost cities disappeared beneath a sea of green. Then lasers pierced the canopy, and the ancient world emerged once again. Today, LiDAR is considered one of the most important tools in modern archaeology, not because it creates new history, but because it reveals history that was already there, waiting, hidden beneath the jungle, invisible to the human eye, a forgotten civilization buried beneath forests, a world of lost cities and ancient roads, and one of the most astonishing archaeological discoveries of the modern age, all revealed by beams of light from the sky, the forgotten underground quarry larger than a city. Beneath the streets of Paris lies a hidden world that few people ever see, a vast underground maze stretching for hundreds of kilometers beneath one of the most famous cities on Earth. Dark tunnels, endless passageways, collapsed chambers, and entire networks carved deep into the bedrock. Most people know this underground realm because of the Paris catacombs, but the catacombs are only a tiny fraction of the story, because beneath Paris lies something far larger, a forgotten quarry system so immense that it resembles an underground city, and parts of it remain largely unexplored even today. The story begins nearly 2,000 years ago. When the city now known as Paris was still a growing settlement, builders needed stone, lots of it. The region's limestone was ideal for construction, strong, abundant, and relatively easy to extract. So workers began digging beneath the ground. At first, the quarries were small, simple excavations supplying local building projects. But as Paris expanded, demand for stone exploded. Churches rose into the sky. Palaces appeared. Walls surrounded the city. Entire neighbourhoods were constructed from limestone taken directly from beneath the streets. Generation after generation continued digging deeper. The result was extraordinary. An enormous underground network slowly spread beneath Paris. Kilometre after kilometre of tunnels carved through the rock. The deeper the city grew above ground, the larger the quarry system became below it. For centuries, few people fully understood its scale. The tunnels expanded in every direction. Some chambers were massive, others so narrow that only a single person could pass through. Together they formed a hidden landscape beneath the city, a second Paris, one made entirely of darkness and stone. Eventually the problem became impossible to ignore. As more rock was removed, parts of the ground above became unstable. Buildings began collapsing. Roads developed dangerous sinkholes. In some places, entire sections of the city suddenly gave way. The most famous collapse occurred in 1774, when a large portion of a street disappeared into the void below. The disaster shocked Paris. Authorities realized they needed to understand what was happening beneath their feet. Engineers were sent underground. Their mission was simple: map the tunnels, reinforce dangerous areas, and prevent the city from collapsing into its own foundations. What they discovered was astonishing. The quarry system was far larger than anyone expected. Some passages extended for incredible distances. Entire sections had been forgotten for centuries. Workers found old inscriptions left by quarrymen long dead. Marks carved into walls, dates, names, fragments of history preserved in the darkness. Then came another unexpected chapter. By the late 18th century, Paris faced a different crisis. Its cemeteries were overcrowded. Millions of human remains filled burial grounds within the city. Health concerns grew. Something had to be done. The solution was unusual. Authorities began transferring bones into sections of the abandoned quarries. Over time, millions of skeletons were moved underground. These became the famous Paris catacombs. Yet the catacombs occupy only a small portion of the underground network. Most of the tunnels were never filled with bones. They remained empty, silent, stretching far beneath the city. One of the most fascinating aspects of the quarry system is how little of it the average person sees. Tourists visit a carefully maintained section of the catacombs, but beyond those public areas lies a maze that continues for hundreds of kilometres. Many passages are closed, others are dangerous, some remain poorly documented. explorers known as cataphils have spent decades navigating these hidden tunnels, discovering forgotten chambers, underground artwork, secret meeting places, and areas that feel completely disconnected from the modern world above. The mystery deepens when considering how much history remains hidden there. The tunnels have witnessed revolutions, wars, occupations, and centuries of urban transformation. While Paris changed above ground, the underground city remained, a silent witness to history. Today, engineers continue monitoring the quarry network to ensure the safety of the city overhead. Yet, despite centuries of study, parts of the system remain mysterious. New discoveries still occur, forgotten chambers still emerge. The underground world continues revealing its secrets. Beneath cafes, museums, and famous landmarks lies one of the largest man-made underground spaces ever created. A forgotten quarry larger than many cities, a labyrinth carved from stone, and one of the most extraordinary hidden worlds on Earth, all waiting beneath the streets of Paris. The lost city discovered beneath a cornfield. In a quiet field in eastern England, archaeologists expected to find traces of an ordinary ancient settlement. A few wooden posts, fragments of pottery, perhaps the remains of a forgotten village. Instead, they uncovered something so extraordinary that it was immediately called Britain's Pompeii, a perfectly preserved prehistoric community. Homes still standing, tools left where people had used them, meals abandoned in cooking pots, and evidence of a disaster that struck with terrifying speed. This remarkable place is known as Must Farm, and it offers one of the most detailed snapshots of everyday life ever discovered from the Bronze Age. The site lay hidden beneath farmland for nearly 3,000 years. To anyone walking across the field, there was nothing unusual to see, just open countryside. Yet beneath the soil rested the remains of a settlement frozen in time. The story begins around 1000 BC. At that time, a small community built their homes above a river channel using large wooden stilts. The houses stood above the water, connected by walkways and platforms. It was an unusual design, practical, defensible, and perfectly suited to the surrounding landscape. For years, life flourished there. Families cooked meals, craftsmen made tools, children grew up among the wooden homes. People traded, worked, and lived their lives much like communities everywhere. Then disaster struck. For reasons still debated today, a devastating fire broke out. The flames spread rapidly through the settlement. Roof after roof ignited. Wooden structures collapsed into the water below. Everything happened quickly. So quickly that many possessions were left behind. People escaped, but much of their world did not. Normally, ancient settlements disappear slowly. Objects decay, buildings collapse, generations disturb earlier remains. But Must Farm was different. When the burning houses fell into the water, mud and sediment quickly sealed the remains. The river protected them from decay. For nearly 3,000 years, the settlement remained preserved beneath the wet ground, waiting, hidden, untouched. When archaeologists finally excavated the site, the discoveries were astonishing. Entire sections of wooden houses survived. Ancient bowls remained where they had fallen. Tools lay scattered across floors. Textiles, wooden objects, and food remains appeared in remarkable condition. It was almost as if the inhabitants had walked away only yesterday. One of the most fascinating discoveries involved daily life. Archaeologists found evidence of what people ate, how they cooked, and even how they organized their homes. Ancient wooden spoons survived. Cooking vessels still contained traces of food. Personal belongings remained inside the houses. Rarely do archaeologists get such an intimate glimpse into ordinary life from so long ago. Usually history preserves kings, monuments, and great battles. Must Farm preserved families. Another surprise came from the craftsmanship. The people living here were highly skilled. They created fine pottery, built sophisticated structures, worked with bronze tools, and maintained connections to wider trade networks. This was not an isolated community struggling to survive. It was a thriving settlement linked to a broader Bronze Age world. One mystery continues to intrigue researchers. What caused the fire? Was it an accident? A cooking disaster that spiraled out of control? Or was the settlement attacked? Evidence exists for several possibilities, but no definitive answer has emerged. The people who witnessed the catastrophe left behind no written record, only the remains of the disaster itself, the sudden destruction is precisely what makes Moss Farm so important. The catastrophe preserved a moment in time, a single day from the Bronze Age, a day that would otherwise have vanished forever. Few archaeological sites offer such a detailed picture of prehistoric life. The discovery transformed understanding of ancient Britain. It revealed a society far more sophisticated and connected than many once imagined. A community of builders, craftsmen, traders, and families living nearly 3,000 years ago. Today, Moss Farm is considered one of the most significant archaeological discoveries ever made in Britain, not because of treasure, not because of rulers, but because it preserved ordinary life with extraordinary detail. Hidden beneath a quiet field was a lost city frozen by fire, a prehistoric community trapped in time, and one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries of the modern age, all waiting beneath a cornfield for thousands of years, the ancient city destroyed in a single night. More than 3,000 years ago, on a small island in the Aegean Sea, a thriving city stood at the height of its power. Its streets were carefully planned, its buildings rose several stories high, its walls were covered with colourful artwork, merchants traded goods from distant lands, ships filled its harbour, and its people lived in one of the most advanced communities of the ancient world. Then, in a single catastrophic event, everything changed. The sky darkened, the ground trembled, and one of the largest volcanic eruptions in human history unleashed its fury. The city was Akrotiri, and its destruction remains one of archaeology's most dramatic stories. Today, Akrotiri lies on the Greek island of Santorini. Visitors see white villages perched above steep cliffs overlooking a flooded volcanic crater. The scenery is beautiful, almost peaceful. But beneath that beauty lies evidence of a disaster that transformed the ancient Mediterranean. Thousands of years ago, Santorini looked very different. The island was larger, the volcano at its centre was intact, and along its shores stood a prosperous Bronze Age city connected to powerful trade networks across the Aegean world. Akrotiri was no ordinary settlement. Archaeologists have uncovered multi-storey buildings, sophisticated drainage systems, paved streets, and remarkably detailed frescoes. The city appears surprisingly modern. Some homes contained indoor plumbing, others featured elaborate artwork depicting ships, animals, landscapes, and daily life. The people of Akrotiri were skilled builders, artists, and traders. Their city was flourishing. Then warning signs began to appear. Researchers believe earthquakes struck the region before the eruption. Buildings suffered damage. Residents likely realized something was wrong. Evidence suggests many structures were being repaired when disaster approached. What happened next changed everything. The volcano erupted with unimaginable force. Ash blasted into the atmosphere. Explosions shook the island. Pyroclastic flows swept across the landscape. The eruption was so powerful that it reshaped the island itself. Entire sections collapsed into the sea. Some scientists compare the event to the eruption of Krakatoa, while others believe it may have been even larger. The effects were felt across the Mediterranean. Tsunamis likely struck distant coastlines. Ash fell across vast regions. Trade networks were disrupted. The disaster became one of the defining events of the Bronze Age. Yet Akrotiri holds a fascinating mystery. Unlike Pompeii, archaeologists have found remarkably few human remains. This suggests that many residents may have escaped before the final eruption. The earthquakes and early volcanic activity may have provided enough warning for evacuation. If true, it means thousands of people witnessed the approaching catastrophe and fled, leaving their city behind forever. That possibility makes Akrotiri even more intriguing. The city appears frozen in time, furniture remained inside buildings, pottery was left behind, tools remained where they were last used. It feels as though the inhabitants simply walked away and never returned. The volcanic ash performed an extraordinary task. It preserved the city, protecting buildings, artwork, and everyday objects for more than 3,000 years. When archaeologists began excavating the site, they uncovered one of the most remarkable Bronze Age settlements ever discovered. The frescoes became especially famous. Bright colours survived despite the passage of millennia. Scenes of ships sailing across the sea, people gathering flowers, animals moving through landscapes. The artwork offers a rare glimpse into a world otherwise lost to history. Through these images, the people of Akrotiri seem almost alive again. One mystery continues to fascinate researchers. Did the destruction of Akrotiri inspire later legends? Some have suggested that stories of a wealthy island civilization destroyed by catastrophe may have contributed to the legend of Atlantis. While evidence remains inconclusive, the comparison is understandable. A prosperous island, a sudden disaster, a civilization swallowed by the sea. The similarities capture the imagination. Today, Akrotiri is considered one of the most important archaeological sites in the world, not because of treasure, not because of kings, but because it preserves a moment frozen forever, a thriving city interrupted by one of nature's greatest catastrophes, hidden beneath volcanic ash for thousands of years, a Bronze Age masterpiece preserved by disaster, and one of the most extraordinary archaeological discoveries ever made. The ancient city destroyed in a single night, yet remembered for thousands of years. The ancient burial where the dead were turned into statues. High in the misty mountains of Indonesia lies a place where the dead are never truly gone, a place where ancestors continue watching over the living, where funeral ceremonies can last for days, sometimes even weeks, and where lifelike statues stand silently from cliff sides, gazing across the valleys below. To outsiders, the sight is unforgettable. Rows of human figures staring from the rock face, frozen in time, as if the dead themselves are still present. These mysterious figures are known as Tau Tau, and they belong to one of the world's most fascinating burial traditions. The story begins in the highlands of Sulawesi, home to the Toraja people. For centuries, communities have lived among these mountains, developing traditions unlike anywhere else on Earth. Among them is a unique relationship with death. In many cultures, funerals mark an ending. For the Toraja, they are often viewed as continuation, a transition rather than a farewell. That belief shaped some of the most remarkable burial sites ever created. When important individuals died, families sometimes commissioned wooden figures known as Tau Tau. These statues were carved to resemble the deceased. Facial features, clothing, expressions. Every detail was intended to represent the person as accurately as possible. The result was striking. The figures appear almost alive, standing silently as guardians of memory, watching over future generations. One of the most extraordinary aspects of the tradition is where the statues were placed. Many overlook burial chambers carved directly into cliffs, high above the ground, protected within the rock itself. From a distance, visitors often notice the figures before they see the tombs. Rows of statues staring outward from balconies cut into the mountainside. The effect is haunting, yet also deeply human, a visible connection between the living and the dead. The origins of the tradition stretch back centuries. The Toraja believed ancestors continued influencing the world long after death. Remembering them was important. Honouring them was important. The statues became a way to preserve that connection, not merely as artwork, but as spiritual representations of real people who once lived. Each figure carried meaning. Each represented a life remembered by the community. Funeral ceremonies themselves could be enormous events. Families often spent years preparing for them. In some cases, relatives saved money for long periods before holding the final burial. The ceremonies involved gatherings, rituals, music, and community participation. They were among the most important events in Toraja society. The burial itself was only one part of a much larger tradition. To outsiders, some practices seem almost unbelievable. Historically, the deceased could remain within family homes for extended periods before the final funeral ceremony took place. They were treated with respect and considered part of the household until the proper rituals could be completed. This reflects a very different understanding of death than many people are familiar with today, one rooted in continuity rather than separation. The Tau Tau statues remain among the most famous elements of this tradition, yet they also raise fascinating questions. How old is the practice? How has it changed through time? And how many statues have disappeared over the centuries? Some figures have been damaged by weather. Others were stolen by collectors in past decades. Many original statues have vanished, but countless others remain watching from the cliffs, silent witnesses to generations of history. The burial sites themselves are equally remarkable. Entire chambers were carved into solid rock using simple tools. The work required tremendous effort. Families invested enormous resources creating resting places for their ancestors. The result was a landscape unlike any other. part cemetery, part monument, part living connection to the past. Today, archaeologists and anthropologists continue studying the traditions of the Taraja people, not because they belong to a forgotten civilization, but because they preserve cultural practices that help us understand humanity's relationship with memory, ancestry, and death. The Tautau statues are more than carvings. They are reminders, symbols of lives remembered long after those lives ended. High, in the mountains of Sulawesi, the stone cliffs still hold their secrets. Rows of wooden ancestors continue gazing across the valleys below, watching, waiting, and preserving one of the world's most extraordinary burial traditions, a place where the dead became statues, and where memory was carved into the mountains themselves. The ancient fortress built on top of a giant rock. High above the mountains of Azerbaijan stands a fortress so dramatic that it almost looks impossible. Stone walls cling to steep cliffs, ancient towers rise from bare rock, and a narrow path winds upward toward a stronghold that once seemed completely unconquerable. For centuries, armies looked up at this fortress and saw the same thing. A nightmare. A fortress built in one of the most defensible locations imaginable. A place known today as Alinya Fortress, and a place often called the Machu Picchu of Azerbaijan. But its real story may be even more remarkable. The fortress sits atop a giant rocky mountain in the Nakhchivan region of Azerbaijan. From a distance, it appears less like a castle and more like part of the mountain itself. The walls follow the contours of the cliffs. The towers seem to grow directly from the stone. Nature and architecture blend together so perfectly that separating one from the other becomes difficult. The location was chosen for a reason. Anyone approaching the fortress could be seen long before they arrived. Steep slopes protected nearly every side. Attackers faced an exhausting climb before even reaching the outer defences. For ancient rulers, it was the perfect stronghold. The origins of Alinya stretch back many centuries. Exactly when the first fortifications appeared remains uncertain. Different civilizations occupied and expanded the site over time. Each left its mark upon the mountain. New walls were added, defences strengthened, structures expanded. Generation after generation transformed the fortress into one of the most formidable strongholds in the region. At its peak, Alinya was far more than a military outpost. It functioned as a fortified city. Homes stood within its walls. Storage facilities held food and supplies. Water systems supported long occupations. Entire communities could survive here even during times of conflict. The fortress became a mountain kingdom protected by stone and height. One of the most fascinating chapters in its history came during the 14th century. At that time, Alinya gained a reputation as one of the most difficult fortresses in the world to capture. Its defences became legendary. Invaders repeatedly struggled against the mountain stronghold. The fortress seemed almost invincible. Then came one of history's most feared conquerors, Timur, known in the West as Tamerlane. His armies swept across vast regions of Asia and the Middle East, defeating kingdoms and empires along the way. Yet even Timur encountered resistance at Alinya. Historical accounts suggest the fortress withstood a prolonged siege lasting years. Imagine life inside those walls. Soldiers standing watch along the cliffs, families waiting for news below, supplies carefully rationed, the mountain fortress refusing to surrender. The siege became part of the site's legend, a symbol of endurance against overwhelming odds. The architecture itself remains astonishing. Walls climb hundreds of meters up the mountainside. Defensive positions overlook every possible approach. Even modern visitors often struggle with the climb. Standing at the summit provides a clear understanding of why the fortress proved so difficult to conquer. The views stretch for incredible distances. Entire valleys unfold below. Nothing moves unnoticed. One mystery that continues to intrigue historians is how builders transported materials to such a challenging location. Every stone had to reach the mountaintop. Every wall had to be constructed under difficult conditions. The effort required must have been enormous. Yet generation after generation continued improving the fortress. Clearly they believed the location justified the work. Eventually, changing political realities reduced the fortress's importance. Empires shifted, trade routes changed, military technology evolved. The great mountain stronghold gradually declined. Its walls began to crumble. Its towers fell silent. Nature slowly reclaimed parts of the site. For centuries, the fortress remained a forgotten giant overlooking the landscape, Then archaeologists, historians, and restoration teams began bringing attention back to Alinya. Today, visitors climbing the ancient pathways encounter one of the most spectacular fortresses anywhere in the world, not because of treasure, not because of famous kings, but because of its location. A fortress built where few would dare to build, a city balanced on a mountain, a stronghold that challenged conquerors for centuries. High above Azerbaijan stands a castle carved into the sky, a fortress atop a giant rock, and one of the most extraordinary forgotten strongholds ever built, the ancient temple where thousands of animals were buried. Beneath the sands of Egypt, not far from the famous pyramids of Saqqara, lies a labyrinth filled with the remains of millions of animals: cats, dogs, falcons, baboons, even crocodiles. For centuries, these underground tunnels remained hidden beneath the desert. When archaeologists finally explored them, they uncovered one of the strangest religious landscapes of the ancient world, a place where animals were mummified on an enormous scale, a place where pilgrims travelled from across Egypt to honour the gods, and a place where countless creatures were buried in sacred catacombs stretching deep beneath the earth. This is the story of the Saqqara animal catacombs, one of the most mysterious sites in ancient Egypt. Most people know Saqqara because of the step pyramid of Djoser, one of the oldest pyramids ever built. But beneath the desert surrounding those monuments lies another world entirely, a hidden network of tunnels carved into the rock, dark passageways extending for kilometres underground. For generations, these tunnels served as sacred burial places for animals connected to Egyptian religion. To understand why, it helps to understand how the ancient Egyptians viewed animals. Many gods were associated with specific creatures. Cats were linked to the goddess Bastet. Falcons represented Horus. Ibises were connected to Thoth. Baboons also held sacred significance. Animals were not merely part of the natural world, they were symbols of divine power, messengers between humanity and the gods. Over time, a remarkable tradition developed. Pilgrims visiting temples would purchase mummified animals as offerings. These offerings were presented to the gods in hopes of receiving blessings, protection, healing, or good fortune. The practice became incredibly popular, so popular that enormous industries emerged to supply the demand. Animals were raised, cared for, and eventually prepared for burial on a scale almost impossible to imagine. Archaeologists exploring the catacombs discovered staggering numbers of remains. Millions of mummified animals once filled these tunnels. One section alone contained vast quantities of dog mummies, another held countless birds. Elsewhere, cat mummies were stacked in extraordinary numbers. The scale of the operation reveals just how important animal worship became during certain periods of Egyptian history. One of the most fascinating discoveries involved the catacombs of Anubis, named after the jackal-headed god associated with death and the afterlife. Researchers found tunnel systems extending deep into the bedrock beneath Saqqara. The passages seemed endless. At one time, they were packed with animal mummies placed there by worshippers over many centuries. The sight must have been astonishing, a sacred underground world dedicated entirely to religious devotion. The mystery deepens when considering how these enormous numbers were produced. Where did all the animals come from? How were they raised? How was such a vast operation organised? Evidence suggests specialised breeding facilities existed to supply temples with animals for mummification. Ancient Egypt had effectively created one of the largest religious industries of the ancient world. Yet despite decades of research, many details remain unclear. One surprising discovery came from modern scientific studies. Not every mummy contained a complete animal. Some held only partial remains. Others contained feathers, bones, or small fragments. A few contained almost nothing at all. This has led researchers to debate exactly how the offering system functioned and whether demand sometimes exceeded supply. The answers remain uncertain. Like many ancient mysteries, the catacombs reveal only part of the story. The tunnels themselves are equally impressive. Carved deep beneath the desert, they form a hidden landscape invisible from the surface. Above ground stand pyramids and monuments known around the world. Below ground lies a sacred city of the dead devoted not to people, but to animals. For centuries, pilgrims continued arriving. Offerings continued accumulating. The catacombs expanded. Then gradually the tradition faded. Ancient Egypt changed. New rulers arrived. Old religions declined. The tunnels were abandoned and forgotten beneath the sands. For nearly 2,000 years, silence filled the underground, passages. Then archaeologists rediscovered them. Today, the Saqqara animal catacombs remain one of the most unusual archaeological sites ever uncovered. Not because of gold, not because of kings, but because they reveal a side of Egyptian civilization that many people never imagine. A world where millions of sacred animals were buried beneath the desert, a hidden underground temple of devotion, and one of the strangest religious mysteries of the ancient world. Beneath the sands of Saqqara lies a labyrinth filled with sacred creatures, a city of animal mummies, and a forgotten chapter of Egypt's extraordinary past, the lost capital hidden behind giant walls. Long before the rise of ancient Greece, before Rome became an empire, and centuries before many of the world's most famous kingdoms appeared, a powerful civilization ruled much of the ancient Near East, from a city protected by enormous stone walls, a city filled with temples, royal palaces, monumental gates guarded by carved stone beasts, and a city so important that kings from across the ancient world feared its armies. This was Hattusa, the lost capital of the Hittite Empire, and for thousands of years its ruins remained hidden among the hills of central Turkey. Today, the remains of Hattusa sit in a quiet landscape far removed from the power it once commanded. Ancient walls snake across the hillsides. Massive stone blocks still stand where builders placed them more than 3,000 years ago. At first glance, the site feels isolated. But during its peak, Hattusa was one of the greatest cities in the world. The city became the capital of the Hittites, a civilization that rivaled Egypt, Assyria, and Babylon. Its rulers controlled vast territories stretching across Anatolia and beyond. Armies marched from its gates. Diplomats travelled its roads. Kings governed an empire from behind its mighty defences. Yet despite its importance, most people today know very little about it. One of the most striking features of Hattusa is its walls. They were enormous, stretching for several kilometres around the city. Built from massive stone foundations and once topped with mud brick fortifications, they transformed the settlement into a formidable stronghold. Anyone approaching the city would have immediately understood its power. The walls climbed across hills and valleys, following the contours of the landscape. Even in ruins they remain impressive. But the gates are perhaps even more remarkable. The most famous is the Lion Gate. Huge stone lions stand guard on either side of the entrance. Their faces still watch silently after more than 3,000 years. No one knows exactly what ancient visitors thought when they passed between them. But the message was clear. This was a city of strength, a city of authority, a city not to be challenged. Elsewhere stood the King's Gate and the mysterious Sphinx Gate. Each entrance was decorated with powerful symbolic imagery. The city was designed to impress as much as defend. Inside the walls lay a thriving capital. Temples dominated important districts. Administrative buildings managed the affairs of the empire. Storerooms held supplies. Residential areas housed thousands of people. At its peak, Hattusa may have contained a population of tens of thousands, a massive urban centre by ancient standards. One of the most fascinating discoveries at the site involved clay tablets, thousands of them, written in cuneiform script. These records transformed understanding of the Hittites. For centuries, historians knew little about the civilization. Then the tablets revealed laws, treaties, diplomatic correspondence, religious texts, and royal records. Suddenly, a forgotten empire began speaking again after thousands of years of silence. Among the most famous documents was a peace treaty signed between the Hittites and Egypt following the Battle of Kadesh. It is often considered one of the oldest known international peace agreements in history. The discovery showed just how influential the Hittites had become. They were not a minor kingdom. They were one of the superpowers of the ancient world. Yet despite all their strength, the empire eventually collapsed. Around 1200 BC, the ancient world entered a period of upheaval. Great civilizations weakened, trade networks broke down, cities were abandoned. The Hittite Empire disappeared during this turbulent era, and Hattusa fell silent. The reasons remain debated today. Invasions, economic collapse, climate change, internal instability. Perhaps all played a role. The once powerful capital was abandoned, its temples emptied, its gates stood alone. And slowly, nature reclaimed the city. For nearly 3,000 years, the ruins remained hidden among the hills. The empire faded from memory. Its kings were forgotten, its achievements lost. Then archaeologists began uncovering the ancient capital once more. Every excavation revealed new surprises: walls, temples, archives, monuments, evidence of a civilization far more advanced and influential than anyone had imagined. Today, Hattusa is recognized as one of the greatest archaeological sites in the world. Not because of treasure, not because of legends, but because it reveals a forgotten empire that once stood alongside the greatest powers of the ancient age. Hidden behind giant walls stood a lost capital, a city of lion gates and royal palaces, a centre of power that ruled an empire, and one of history's most extraordinary forgotten worlds. The tomb filled with thousands of shell beads. More than 30,000 years ago, during the Ice Age, a small group of people buried 2 children in a grave unlike anything archaeologists had ever seen. The burial was extraordinary, not because of gold, not because of jewels, and not because of a mighty king. Instead, the grave was filled with something far more surprising. Thousands upon thousands of tiny shell beads, carefully crafted by hand, placed beside the dead with astonishing care. The discovery would challenge everything researchers thought they knew about prehistoric humanity. The site is known as Sungir, and it remains one of the most remarkable Ice Age burials ever found. Located near the city of Vladimir in western Russia, Sungir dates back roughly 34,000 years. That means the people buried there lived long before agriculture, long before cities, long before written language. They existed in a world of mammoths, reindeer, and endless cold landscapes stretching across Ice Age Europe. For many years, people imagined such ancient humans lived simple lives focused entirely on survival. Sungir tells a very different story. The site was discovered during the 20th century when excavations uncovered several remarkable burials. One belonged to an adult man, others belonged to 2 children buried side by side. What archaeologists found inside these graves left them stunned. The bodies had been covered with incredible numbers of ivory beads. Researchers estimate that more than 13,000 beads were placed within the burials. Each one had been individually carved, shaped, and polished by hand. The amount of labour involved was staggering. Creating a single bead could take hours. Producing thousands may have required years of work. Why would Ice Age people invest so much effort into a burial? That question remains one of archaeology's greatest mysteries. The children were also buried with other extraordinary objects. Long spears carved from mammoth ivory, decorative ornaments, animal teeth, carefully crafted artifacts placed beside them with great attention. The grave goods suggest these individuals held special significance. But why? The children showed no obvious signs of becoming powerful hunters or leaders. Yet they received one of the richest prehistoric burials ever discovered. Some researchers believe status may have been inherited rather than earned. Others think the burial reflected spiritual beliefs we can no longer understand. The answers disappeared tens of thousands of years ago. One of the most fascinating aspects of Sungir is what it reveals about human thought. The people who created these burials were not simply concerned with survival. They cared about symbolism, identity, memory, and perhaps the afterlife. The effort invested in the graves suggests complex beliefs about death and human existence. Beliefs that emerged surprisingly early in our history. The shell beads themselves deepen the mystery. Many originated far from the burial site. Some materials appear to have travelled considerable distances before reaching Sungir. This suggests ancient networks of exchange connecting groups across vast regions. Even during the Ice Age, human communities were not isolated. Ideas and objects moved between them. The world was more connected than many once imagined. Archaeologists also studied the remains of the individuals themselves. Scientific analysis revealed clues about their lives, diets, and health. Yet the greatest mystery remains their social role. Why were these particular people honoured so lavishly? What made them special? The evidence offers hints, not answers. The burial continues to puzzle researchers decades after its discovery. Perhaps that uncertainty is what makes Sungir so captivating. The graves feel deeply human. People gathered here in grief. They spent enormous effort preparing the burial. They carefully placed each bead, each ornament, each offering. Then they covered the grave and left, never imagining that tens of thousands of years later strangers would uncover their work. For more than 30 millennia, the burial remained hidden beneath the earth. Ice ages came and went, civilizations rose and fell, empires appeared and vanished, yet the beads remained exactly where they had been placed, waiting, silent, preserved by time. Today, Sungir is considered one of the most important prehistoric sites ever discovered, not because of treasure, not because of monuments, but because it reveals the emotional and symbolic world of some of our earliest ancestors, a world filled with artistry, meaning and mystery. Hidden beneath the Russian soil lay a tomb covered in thousands of shell beads, a burial older than history itself, and one of humanity's most extraordinary windows into the Ice Age past. The ancient stone towers nobody can explain. On a Mediterranean island west of Italy stand thousands of mysterious stone towers. Some rise above rolling hills, others overlook valleys and coastlines. Many have stood for more than 3,000 years, and despite decades of research, nobody fully understands why they were built. These structures are known as nuraghi, and among the most impressive of them all is Nuraghe Santu Antin, a colossal stone monument often called the King of the Nuraghi. Its massive walls, hidden chambers, and towering architecture continue to puzzle archaeologists to this day. The story begins on the island of Sardinia. Today, Sardinia is known for its beautiful coastline and ancient villages. But long before Romans, Greeks, or Carthaginians arrived, another civilization dominated the island, a civilization now known as the Nuragic culture. For centuries, these people built thousands of stone towers across the landscape. No other place on Earth contains anything quite like them. The scale is astonishing. More than 7,000 nuraghi have been identified across Sardinia. Some are simple towers. Others form enormous complexes with multiple structures, courtyards, and defensive walls. Yet among them all, Santu Antin stands apart. The monument dominates the surrounding countryside. Its builders used massive stone blocks, carefully fitted together without mortar. Some weigh several tons. Even after thousands of years, the structure remains standing. The central tower originally rose more than 20 meters into the sky. For an ancient Bronze Age society, that was an extraordinary achievement. Walking inside the monument today feels like entering another world. Narrow passageways twist through thick stone walls. Hidden chambers appear unexpectedly. Staircases spiral upward toward higher levels. The engineering is remarkable. Every stone was positioned with precision, every space carefully planned. The builders clearly possess skills far beyond what many people expect from a Bronze Age culture. One of the greatest mysteries is the purpose of these towers. Were they fortresses, palaces, religious temples, watchtowers? Theories vary. Some archaeologists believe they served defensive functions. Their elevated positions would have provided excellent views of the surrounding landscape. Others suggest they were symbols of power and authority, built by local leaders to demonstrate status. Another possibility is that they served multiple purposes at different times. The truth remains uncertain, and that uncertainty has fueled debate for generations. Santu Antin becomes even more impressive when viewed as part of its wider community. Excavations revealed evidence of surrounding settlements where people lived, worked, and raised families. The tower was not isolated. It stood at the heart of a thriving society, a centre of activity surrounded by homes, workshops, and daily life. The people who built it were not merely constructing monuments, they were creating communities. One fascinating aspect of the structure is its complexity. The interior contains multiple levels connected by stairways hidden within the walls. This design required advanced planning and engineering knowledge. How did the builders develop these techniques? Where did the architectural ideas originate? No written records survive to answer those questions. The Nuragic people left behind stone, not explanations. Their language remains largely unknown. Their stories disappeared long ago. Only their monuments remain. Archaeologists have uncovered pottery, tools, and artifacts that reveal glimpses of Nuragic life. Trade connected Sardinia to other parts of the Mediterranean. Goods moved between distant regions. Ideas travelled with them. The island was not isolated from the ancient world. Yet despite these connections, the Nuragic civilization developed architecture unlike anything found elsewhere. That uniqueness makes the towers even more mysterious. Eventually, new powers arrived in the Mediterranean. Phoenicians established trading posts. Carthaginians expanded their influence. Romans conquered the island. The world changed. The great age of the Nuraghi came to an end. Some towers were abandoned. Others were reused by later generations. But the original purpose behind many of them faded from memory. For thousands of years they stood silently across the Sardinian landscape, watching civilizations come and go. Today, Santu Antine remains one of the best preserved examples of this remarkable tradition. A monument built by a civilization that left few written clues behind. A tower filled with unanswered questions, and one of the greatest architectural mysteries of the ancient world. Across the hills of Sardinia stand thousands of stone towers, silent, ancient, and still refusing to reveal exactly why they were built. The lost city hidden beneath a lake. Off the coast of modern-day Israel, beneath the waters of the Mediterranean Sea, lies a village that should not exist. A settlement older than Stonehenge, older than the pyramids. A place where people built homes, dug wells, raised families, and buried their dead thousands of years ago. Today, however, it rests beneath the sea, hidden under waves that slowly swallowed an entire community. This remarkable site is known as Atlit Yam, and it is one of the most extraordinary underwater archaeological discoveries ever made. The village remained hidden for nearly 9,000 years. Fishermen passed above it, boats crossed the coastline, generations lived nearby without knowing that an ancient world rested beneath the water. Then, during the 1980s, archaeologists made an astonishing discovery. Scattered across the seabed were stone structures, walls, ancient hearths, human burials, and the remains of a settlement preserved beneath the Mediterranean. The findings immediately captured attention, because Atlit Yam was not a shipwreck. It was an entire prehistoric village, frozen in time beneath the sea. When researchers began studying the site, they realized its age was extraordinary. The settlement dates back roughly 9,000 years. At that time, agriculture was beginning to transform human society. People were settling in permanent communities rather than constantly moving from place to place. Atlit Yam was part of that revolution. Its inhabitants built stone houses arranged around open spaces. They cultivated crops, raised animals, and created a thriving coastal community. One of the most fascinating discoveries was a stone circle located near the centre of the settlement. Several large stones stood upright around a freshwater spring. The arrangement immediately reminded researchers of later monuments such as Stonehenge, yet Atlit Yam is far older. Why the stones were placed there remains uncertain. Perhaps the site held religious significance. Perhaps ceremonies took place beside the spring. Or perhaps the monument served a purpose that has been completely forgotten. The mystery remains unsolved. Excavations also uncovered human burials beneath the settlement. The remains offered rare insights into prehistoric life. Some skeletons even revealed evidence of ancient disease, providing one of the earliest known examples of tuberculosis ever discovered. For archaeologists, the village became an incredible time capsule, a glimpse into daily life nearly 9 millennia ago. But the greatest mystery surrounds the village's disappearance. What happened to Atlit Yam? Why is it underwater today? The most likely answer involves rising sea levels. At the end of the last ice age, massive glaciers melted around the world. As the ice disappeared, sea levels gradually rose. Coastlines changed. Entire landscapes vanished beneath the water. Communities living near the shore were forced to move inland. Atlit Yam may have been one of those lost places. Yet some researchers have proposed another possibility. Evidence suggests a massive tsunami may have struck the region thousands of years ago. A gigantic wave generated by volcanic activity in the Mediterranean could have devastated coastal settlements. If such an event occurred, it may have accelerated the village's abandonment. The exact answer remains debated. Perhaps rising seas slowly overwhelmed the settlement. Perhaps a sudden catastrophe played a role, or perhaps both. Whatever happened, the people eventually left. Their homes disappeared beneath the water, and their village was lost to history. For thousands of years, fish swam through ancient streets, seaweed covered stone walls. The Mediterranean protected the site in darkness and silence. Then archaeology brought it back into the light. Today, Atlit Yam is considered one of the world's most important underwater archaeological sites. Not because of treasure, not because of kings, but because it preserves a forgotten chapter of humanity's story, a chapter from a time when some of the world's first villages were taking shape. Hidden beneath the sea lies a lost city older than the pyramids, a submerged world of stone houses and ancient mysteries, and one of the most remarkable prehistoric discoveries ever found beneath the waves, the forgotten city that controlled an ancient trade empire. On the southeastern coast of India lie the remains of a city that once connected worlds, a place where merchants from distant lands arrived carrying wine, glassware, precious goods, and stories from across the seas, a place where ships travelled thousands of kilometres to reach its shores, and a place so important that it became part of one of the greatest trade networks of the ancient world. Today, this forgotten city is known as Archaeological, and although little remains above the surface, its discoveries reveal a remarkable chapter of global history. For centuries, Archaeological sat quietly near the modern city of Puducherry. The ruins appeared unremarkable, a few scattered remains, fragments of ancient walls, pieces of pottery buried beneath the earth. Few people realized they were standing above one of the most important trading centres in ancient India. Everything changed when archaeologists began excavating the site. The discoveries that emerged from the soil stunned researchers. Among the ruins were objects that had travelled from astonishing distances. Roman pottery, Mediterranean amphorae once used to transport wine and olive oil, glassware from foreign lands, luxury goods from across the ancient world. The evidence suggested something extraordinary. Archaeological was not a small local settlement. It was an international port, a thriving centre of commerce connecting India with distant civilizations. The city flourished roughly 2,000 years ago, during a period when trade across the Indian Ocean was expanding rapidly. Merchant ships sailed between India, Arabia, East Africa, and the Roman Empire. Goods moved across vast distances. Ideas travelled alongside them, and Archaeological became one of the key gateways linking these worlds together. Imagine arriving at the harbour during its peak. Ships anchored offshore, merchants negotiating prices, workers unloading cargo from distant lands, languages from different cultures echoing through the streets. The city must have felt like a crossroads of the ancient world. One of the most fascinating discoveries involved Roman artefacts. Archaeologists uncovered large quantities of imported goods that originated thousands of kilometres away. The presence of these objects confirmed what ancient writers had hinted at centuries earlier. Trade between India and Rome was not occasional. It was substantial, profitable, and incredibly important. Roman merchants were willing to cross dangerous seas to obtain Indian spices, gemstones, textiles, and luxury products. Archaeological helped make that exchange possible. The site also revealed evidence of local industries. Craftsmen worked with beads, ceramics, and other valuable goods. Production occurred on a significant scale. This was not merely a place where foreign products arrived. It was an active economic centre generating wealth through trade and manufacturing. The city played a major role in regional commerce. One mystery continues to intrigue historians. Just how large was Archaeological's influence? The artefacts suggest connections stretching across continents. Yet much of the settlement remains unexplored. Parts of the ancient city may still lie hidden beneath the ground, waiting to reveal new clues about the global trade networks of the ancient world. The discoveries challenge a common misconception that ancient civilizations existed in isolation. Archaeological demonstrates something very different. Long before modern globalization, people were already connected through vast networks of commerce. Ideas, technologies, and goods crossed oceans. Cultures interacted. Economies became intertwined. The ancient world was far more connected than many imagine. Yet eventually the city declined. Trade patterns shifted. Political conditions changed. New ports rose elsewhere. Gradually, Archaeological lost its importance. The harbour fell silent. The merchants disappeared. The buildings crumbled, and the city faded into history. For centuries, its role in shaping ancient commerce was largely forgotten. Then, archaeology brought its story back to life. Today, Archaeological stands as one of the most important archaeological sites in India. Not because of kings, not because of armies, but because it reveals how interconnected the ancient world truly was. A forgotten city where East met West, a port that linked civilizations across, oceans, and a trading centre that helped build one of history's earliest global networks. Hidden beneath the soil of southern India lies the remains of a lost commercial empire, a city of merchants and sailors, a gateway between worlds, and one of the most fascinating forgotten ports of the ancient age, the giant earth mounds visible from the sky. More than 3,000 years ago, in what is now the state of Louisiana, people built one of the most extraordinary monuments in North America. Not from stone, not from brick, and not from wood. Instead, they moved millions of baskets of earth, shaping the landscape itself into a vast geometric design so large that its true scale can only be appreciated from the sky. For centuries, the purpose of this place remained a mystery. Who built it? Why did they build it? And how did they organise such an enormous project without cities, metal tools, or written records? This remarkable site is known as Poverty Point, and it remains one of the greatest archaeological mysteries in the Americas. Today, the earthworks appear as a series of giant curved ridges spread across the landscape. At ground level, it can be difficult to understand what you're seeing. The ridges seem like ordinary rises in the earth, but viewed from above, a completely different picture emerges. The site forms enormous concentric arcs stretching across hundreds of acres. The design is so massive that early visitors often fail to recognize it as a human creation. Only aerial photography revealed the true scale of the monument, and the scale is astonishing. The builders moved an estimated millions of cubic feet of soil to create the earthworks, without wheeled vehicles, without draft animals, without modern engineering equipment. Every basket of earth had to be carried by hand. The amount of labour involved is almost impossible to imagine. Yet somehow, thousands of years ago, people completed the project. The obvious question is why? What purpose could justify such an enormous effort? Archaeologists have debated the answer for decades. Some believe Poverty Point served as a ceremonial centre where people gathered for rituals, trade, and important events. Others suggest it functioned as a regional hub connecting distant communities. Perhaps it was both. The site may have been one of the most important gathering places in prehistoric North America. One of the most fascinating discoveries is the evidence of long-distance trade. Excavations uncovered materials that originated hundreds, and sometimes thousands, of kilometres away. Stone from the Appalachian Mountains, copper from the Great Lakes region, other materials from distant parts of the continent. These discoveries reveal something remarkable. The people of Poverty Point were connected to an enormous network of exchange. Far from being isolated, they participated in a world that stretched across much of North America. At the centre of the earthwork stand several large mounds. The most impressive is known as Mound A. Rising more than 20 metres high, it remains one of the largest prehistoric earthen structures in the United States. Constructing it required extraordinary planning and organisation. The builders clearly understood engineering principles. They knew how to shape the land, how to stabilise large structures, and how to coordinate massive labour projects. One mystery that continues to puzzle researchers is the social organisation behind the site. Who directed construction? Was there a powerful leader, a council of elders, religious authorities? The answers remain unclear. Unlike later civilizations, the people of Poverty Point left behind no written records. Only the earth itself preserves their story. The site also challenges long-held assumptions about ancient North America. For many years, people underestimated the complexity of prehistoric societies on the continent. Poverty Point tells a different story, a story of innovation, planning, trade, and monumental construction on a scale few expected. The builders achieved something extraordinary thousands of years before many famous civilizations reached their peak. Then eventually activity at the site declined. The gatherings became less frequent. Construction stopped. People moved elsewhere. The giant earthworks remained behind. Silent monuments slowly blending into the landscape. For centuries, nature softened their edges. Grass covered the ridges. Trees grew nearby. The purpose of the site faded from memory. Yet the earthworks endured. Today, Poverty Point is recognized as one of the most important archaeological sites in the Americas. Not because of treasure, not because of kings, but because it reveals the achievements of a society capable of transforming an entire landscape. A society whose story is still being uncovered. Visible from the sky are giant earth mounds built by forgotten hands. A prehistoric masterpiece shaped from soil. a monument larger than many ancient cities, and one of North America's greatest archaeological mysteries, the hidden necropolis carved into a cliff face. High above an ancient river valley in modern-day Turkey, enormous stone tombs stare out from the face of a cliff. From a distance, they look like temples suspended in mid-air, their entrances cut directly into solid rock, their columns standing thousands of years after the people who built them disappeared. And their location raises an obvious question. How did anyone create such monuments hundreds of feet above the ground? This remarkable place is known as Myra, and its cliffside necropolis remains one of the most spectacular burial sites of the ancient world. The ruins are located along the Mediterranean coast of southwestern Turkey. Today, visitors arrive expecting to see ancient tombs. What they do not expect is the scale. Entire sections of the cliff have been transformed into a city of the dead. Dozens of tombs line the rock face, some simple, others elaborate and beautifully decorated. Together they create one of the most unforgettable landscapes in archaeology. The tombs were built by the Lycians, an ancient people who occupied this region long before the arrival of the Romans. The Lycians developed a unique culture with its own language, traditions, and beliefs. Among those beliefs was an unusual idea about death. They thought the dead should be buried high above the earth, closer to the heavens, closer to the gods. As a result, wealthy families commissioned tombs directly into the cliffs overlooking the valley below. The higher the tomb, the greater the prestige, at least according to one popular interpretation. If true, the location itself became a symbol of status. The most important individuals occupied the highest positions on the mountainside. One of the most fascinating aspects of Myra is the architecture. Many tombs resemble wooden houses, others imitate temples. Carved doorways, columns, and decorative details were all cut directly into the rock. The craftsmanship is astonishing. Every feature had to be created while working on a nearly vertical cliff face, without modern equipment, without steel tools. Yet the builders achieved extraordinary results. Even after more than 2,000 years, many details remain clearly visible. The largest tombs dominate the landscape. Some contain multiple chambers. Others feature elaborate carvings depicting scenes from mythology and daily life. These decorations provide rare glimpses into Lycian beliefs, a world that largely vanished long ago. Because unlike some ancient civilizations, the Lycians left behind relatively few written records. The tombs often tell us more than their texts. One mystery continues to intrigue archaeologists. How exactly were the tombs constructed? The cliffs are steep. The working conditions must have been extremely difficult. Researchers believe builders likely used wooden scaffolding attached directly to the rock face, but the scale of certain tombs suggests years of labour and considerable engineering skill. The project would have required planning, resources, and determination. Clearly, these monuments held enormous importance. The necropolis also survived the arrival of new civilizations. The Persians ruled the region, then the Greeks, then the Romans. Each brought changes, yet the cliff tombs remained. Silent reminders of an older world, a world that refused to disappear completely. Nearby stood the thriving city of Myra itself, a prosperous centre of trade and culture. Its inhabitants walked beneath the towering tombs every day. The dead literally overlooked the living, watching from the cliffs above, maintaining a permanent presence within the landscape. Eventually, earthquakes damaged parts of the city. Political power shifted elsewhere. Trade routes changed. The ancient settlement declined, yet the tombs endured, too large to move, too impressive to ignore. For centuries, travellers passing through the region recorded their amazement at the sight. Even today, visitors often experience the same reaction, a sense of disbelief, because the necropolis does not seem real. It appears more like something carved from imagination than from stone, yet it is entirely real. One of the greatest surviving achievements of the Lycian civilization. Today, the Myra rock-cut tombs remain among the most famous archaeological sites in Turkey, not because of treasure, not because of conquest, but because they reveal how one ancient culture viewed death, memory, and the afterlife. Hidden within a cliff face stands an entire city of tombs, a necropolis suspended above the earth, a monument to the dead carved directly into the mountains, and one of the most breathtaking burial sites ever created by human hands. The forgotten city, hidden inside a canyon. Deep within the desert landscapes of northwestern Arabia lies a place where towering sandstone cliffs hide the remains of a forgotten world. A world of ancient kingdoms, caravan routes, rock-cut monuments, and cities that once controlled the flow of wealth across the Arabian Peninsula. For centuries, travellers passed through these canyons carrying incense, spices, precious goods, and stories from distant lands. Today, the region is known as Alula, and beneath its dramatic cliffs are the traces of civilizations that helped shape the ancient Middle East. At first glance, the landscape seems almost impossible. Gigantic sandstone formations rise from the desert floor, narrow canyons cut through the rock, hidden valleys appear where none should exist. The scenery feels more like something from a lost world than a real place. Yet for thousands of years, people lived here, built cities here, and transformed this harsh environment into a thriving centre of trade and culture. The secret was location. Alula stood along some of the most important trade routes in the ancient world. Caravans moving between southern Arabia, Egypt, Mesopotamia, and the Mediterranean often passed through the region. The journey across the desert was dangerous. Water was scarce. Distances were enormous. Any settlement capable of providing resources quickly became valuable. Alula became far more than valuable. It became essential. One of the earliest civilizations associated with the area was the ancient kingdom of Dedan. Long before Rome dominated the Mediterranean, rulers here controlled trade moving through the desert. Their wealth came from geography. Merchants needed safe routes. They needed water. They needed protection. The cities of Alula offered all three. As trade increased, prosperity followed. Archaeologists have uncovered evidence of temples, fortifications, tombs, inscriptions, and sophisticated urban planning throughout the region. The discoveries reveal communities that were far more advanced than many people once imagined. One of the most remarkable features is the sheer amount of rock-cut architecture. Across the surrounding cliffs, ancient people carved tombs directly into the sandstone. Doorways appear high above the ground. Facades emerge from seemingly solid rock. Entire burial complexes were created using little more than determination, skill, and time. The workmanship rivals some of the most famous rock-cut monuments anywhere in the world. One mystery that continues to fascinate researchers is how many ancient cities remain hidden within the valleys and canyons. Modern archaeological surveys continue uncovering new structures. Ancient walls emerge from beneath the sand. Forgotten inscriptions appear on cliff faces. Every year seems to reveal another piece of the story. For centuries, much of this history remained largely unknown outside the region. The desert preserved its secrets remarkably well. The area later became associated with the Nabateans, the same civilization that built Petra in modern Jordan. They expanded trade networks and constructed spectacular monuments throughout northwestern Arabia. Their influence can still be seen in the rock-cut tombs scattered across the landscape. These monuments transformed the desert into a vast cultural crossroads linking multiple civilizations. Imagine arriving here 2,000 years ago, a caravan emerging from the desert after weeks of travel, cliffs rising around you, markets filled with traders speaking different languages, goods arriving from distant lands, the scent of incense drifting through the air. Alula was not an isolated outpost. It was a gateway connecting worlds. Yet eventually the trade routes changed. New powers emerged. Economic centres shifted elsewhere. The cities slowly declined. Buildings were abandoned, sand-covered roads. The voices of merchants disappeared from the canyons. For centuries, the desert reclaimed what people had built. The cliffs remained, the tombs remained, but the stories faded, until archaeology began bringing them back. Today, Alula is recognized as one of the most important archaeological regions in the Middle East. Not because of treasure, not because of conquest, but because it preserves an extraordinary record of human history hidden among the sandstone canyons, a forgotten landscape of kingdoms and caravans, city hidden within the desert cliffs, and one of the most fascinating archaeological discoveries of the modern age. Deep inside the canyons of Arabia lies a lost world, a forgotten city carved into stone, and a chapter of history that the desert almost kept forever. The mountain fortress nobody can explain. On a windswept landscape in northern Europe stand the remains of a fortress so precise that it still puzzles historians today. Perfectly circular, carefully planned, built with astonishing accuracy. And constructed during an age most people associate with raiders, warriors, and longships. Yet this was no ordinary Viking settlement. It was an engineering masterpiece, a fortress whose design seems centuries ahead of its time. This place is known as Trelleborg, and its purpose remains one of the greatest mysteries of the Viking Age. For centuries, the fortress lay hidden beneath fields and farmland. The earth slowly covered its walls, its buildings vanished, its story faded from memory. Then archaeologists began uncovering the outlines of something extraordinary. From above, the shape was unmistakable, a nearly perfect circle. Massive defensive ramparts surrounded the site. 4 gateways stood at exact points around the structure. Roads crossed through the centre in a precise geometric pattern. Everything appeared carefully measured. Nothing seemed random. The discovery surprised researchers, because Viking settlements were rarely known for this kind of mathematical precision. The fortress looked planned from the beginning, designed by someone with a clear vision, built according to strict rules, and repeated at several locations across Denmark. Trelleborg was not alone. Other ring fortresses shared remarkably similar designs. The question was obvious. Why? The fortress dates to the late 10th century during the reign of King Harald Bluetooth. The same ruler, famous for unifying much of Denmark and giving his name to modern Bluetooth technology. During his reign, enormous changes were transforming Viking society. Kingdoms were growing stronger. Political power was becoming centralized. Large construction projects appeared across the landscape. Trelleborg may have been part of that transformation, but exactly how remains debated. One theory suggests the fortress functioned as a military base. Its design certainly supports that possibility. The circular walls provided excellent defense. The gates could be controlled easily. The interior was organized into sections capable of housing warriors. If armies gathered here, the fortress would have been an ideal stronghold. Yet some researchers believe that explanation alone is insufficient. The construction required enormous resources, thousands of trees, thousands of workers, careful planning, precise engineering. The scale of the effort suggests a project with broader significance. Perhaps it was also a symbol of royal power, a visible demonstration that a new kind of kingdom was emerging, one capable of organizing people on a massive scale. Excavations revealed longhouses arranged inside the fortress. Families may have lived here. Craftsmen worked here. Soldiers may have trained here. The site was not merely a defensive structure. It was a functioning community. Life unfolded within the walls. People cooked meals, raised children, repaired tools, and watched over the surrounding countryside. One of the most fascinating aspects of Trelleborg is its precision. Modern surveys show that the builders achieved remarkable accuracy. The geometry is extraordinary. The roads align perfectly. The gates match one another. The entire fortress appears designed according to a carefully planned blueprint. How Viking builders achieved this level of precision remains an active area of research. They left no written instructions behind, only the earthworks themselves. And those earthworks continue raising questions. The mystery deepens when considering how briefly some of these fortresses seem to have been used. Evidence suggests certain sites may have been occupied for only a relatively short period before being abandoned. Why invest so much effort into structures that did not remain active for centuries? No one knows for sure. The answer may be tied to political changes, military campaigns, or shifting royal priorities, but the full story remains hidden. Eventually the fortresses fell silent. Their walls eroded, their buildings disappeared, fields replaced roads, the memory of the site slowly vanished. For nearly 1,000 years, Trelleborg slept beneath the landscape. Then archaeology brought it back. Today, it stands as one of the most important Viking discoveries ever made. Not because of treasure, not because of famous battles, but because it reveals a side of Viking society few people expect. A world of planners, engineers, builders, and rulers capable of creating monuments of astonishing sophistication. Hidden beneath the Danish countryside lay a fortress unlike any other, a perfect circle carved into the earth, a monument to power and precision, and one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the Viking Age. The forgotten stone towers of the Caucasus. High in the rugged mountains of the Caucasus stand a group of stone towers that seem almost impossible, built directly onto towering cliffs, balanced above deep gorges, and surrounded by some of the most dramatic landscapes in Eurasia. For centuries, travellers crossing these mountains have looked up at the towers and wondered the same thing. Who built them? How were they constructed in such dangerous locations? And why do they seem to emerge directly from the rocks themselves? These remarkable structures are known as the Vovnushki Towers, and they remain among the most mysterious monuments of the Caucasus Mountains. The towers are located in Ingushetia, a small region in the northern Caucasus between Europe and Asia. Today, the area is known for its rugged beauty. Sharp peaks rise toward the sky, narrow valleys cut through the mountains, ancient paths wind between cliffs and isolated settlements. It is a landscape that feels untouched by time, and hidden within that landscape are the towers. At first glance, Vovnushki looks almost unreal. Two massive defensive towers stand atop separate rock outcrops. Their stone walls rise directly from the cliffs below. From a distance, they appear impossible to reach. Yet centuries ago, people lived and worked within them. The towers were part of a larger network of fortified settlements built throughout the Caucasus. For generations, mountain communities faced threats from rival groups, invading armies, and raiders moving through the region. Defense was essential. The mountains offered protection, but they also demanded ingenuity. The builders of Vovnushki found a solution unlike anything else. Instead of constructing fortresses on flat ground, they transformed entire cliffs into strongholds. Every stone had to be transported through steep terrain. Every wall had to be built in a place where a single mistake could be fatal. The effort required must have been enormous, yet the results were extraordinary. The towers survived centuries of harsh weather, conflict, and earthquakes. Even today, they dominate the landscape. One of the most fascinating aspects of Vovnushki is its location. The towers overlook important routes through the mountains. Anyone travelling through the valley below could be observed. Messages could be passed between nearby settlements. Warnings could spread quickly across the region. The towers were more than buildings. They were part of a defensive system connecting entire communities. Some researchers believe they also symbolize family power and prestige. In the Caucasus, towers often served multiple purposes. They were homes, fortresses, watchtowers, and symbols of identity. Families invested generations of labour constructing and maintaining them. The higher and stronger the tower, the greater the prestige. Vovnushki may have represented both security and status. The architecture itself is remarkable. The towers taper as they rise upward. Their walls become slightly narrower toward the top. This design improved stability while reducing weight. The builders clearly understood engineering principles developed through centuries of experience. Without modern equipment, they created structures capable of surviving in one of the world's most challenging environments. One mystery continues to intrigue historians. How did the builders transport materials to such inaccessible locations? Even modern visitors often struggle to reach the towers, yet every stone had to arrive somehow. The answer likely involved extraordinary effort, teamwork, and knowledge of the mountain terrain. Still, the full story remains uncertain. Like many ancient monuments, Vovnushki preserves the result of human achievement, while hiding the details of its construction. Over the centuries, kingdoms rose and fell around the Caucasus. Empires expanded into the region. Trade routes shifted. Wars transformed the landscape, yet the towers remained, silent guardians overlooking the valleys below, watching history unfold around them. Today, Vovnushki is considered one of the most iconic landmarks of the Caucasus, not because of treasure, not because of kings, but because of its sheer improbability. A fortress built on cliffs, a monument suspended between earth and sky, a reminder of the determination and skill of the people who once called these mountains home. High above the valleys of Ingushetia stand the forgotten stone towers of the Caucasus, ancient, defiant, and still guarding their secrets after hundreds of years. The hidden necropolis carved into a desert cliff. Beneath the deserts of northern Sudan lies a royal cemetery that helped shape the history of an entire kingdom. A place where powerful rulers were buried beneath pyramids. A place filled with hidden tombs, ancient treasures, and mysterious underground chambers. And a place that remained forgotten for centuries beneath the sands of the Nile Valley. This remarkable site is known as El Kuru, and it preserves some of the earliest royal burials of the Kingdom of Kush, one of Africa's greatest ancient civilizations. Today, the landscape appears quiet. Desert winds move across the sand. Rocky hills rise above the Nile. At first glance, little suggests that kings once ruled from this region. Yet more than 2,000 years ago, this was the heartland of a powerful kingdom that would eventually conquer Egypt itself. The story of El Kuru begins during the rise of the Kushite rulers. Long before archaeologists arrived, generations of kings and queens were buried here. Above ground stood pyramids and monuments. Below ground lay carefully carved burial chambers hidden beneath the desert. These rulers belonged to the kingdom of Kush, centered in what is now Sudan. For centuries, Kush grew stronger. Its leaders accumulated wealth, influence, and military power. Eventually, some of them marched north and became pharaohs of Egypt. Yet before that remarkable achievement, many were laid to rest at El Kuru. One of the most fascinating features of the site lies beneath the surface. Archaeologists discovered stairways descending deep underground into royal tombs. Unlike many Egyptian burials, these chambers were cut directly into bedrock beneath the pyramids. The entrances were carefully concealed. Visitors descending into the tombs enter a completely different world. Dark corridors, stone chambers, and walls still bearing traces of ancient decoration. The most famous tomb belongs to King Tanwetamani, one of the last Kushite pharaohs to rule Egypt. His burial chamber contains remarkable paintings that survive for more than 2,000 years. Ancient gods cover the walls. Colourful scenes depict religious beliefs and journeys into the afterlife. Even today, the artwork remains astonishing. The paintings offer a rare glimpse into a civilization often overshadowed by its northern neighbour. Yet El Kuru was not merely copying Egyptian traditions. The Kushites adapted ideas and created their own unique culture. Their rulers built pyramids, but their architecture was different, their art was different. Their traditions reflected a distinct African kingdom with its own identity and history. The cemetery reveals that blend of influences better than almost anywhere else. One mystery that continues to fascinate archaeologists involves the earliest royal burials. Some of the oldest tombs at El Kuru date to a period when the kingdom of Kush was still emerging as a regional power. Researchers continue debating exactly how these rulers gained influence and transformed their kingdom into one of the most formidable states in the ancient Nile Valley. The answers remain buried within the archaeological record. Excavations also uncovered evidence of horses buried alongside royalty. This discovery was extraordinary. The Kushite kings placed enormous importance on horses. These animals symbolized power, prestige, and military strength. Some royal horses received burials of their own. The practice reveals how valuable they were within Kushite society. Few ancient cemeteries preserve such vivid evidence of a ruler's world. The site gradually expanded as generations of kings and queens were buried there. Pyramids rose above the desert. Ceremonies honoured the dead. Priests performed rituals beneath the Sudanese sun. For centuries, El Kuru remained one of the most important sacred places in the kingdom. Then the royal burials shifted elsewhere. New cemeteries emerged. The pyramids slowly deteriorated. Sand covered the monuments. The memory of the site faded. For centuries, travellers passed nearby without understanding what rested beneath the ground. Then archaeology brought the lost necropolis back into the light. Today, El Kuru is recognised as one of the most important archaeological sites in Africa, not because of gold, not because of conquest, but because it reveals the origins of a civilization powerful enough to rule Egypt and challenge the greatest kingdoms of the ancient world. Hidden beneath a desert cliff lies a forgotten royal cemetery, a necropolis of kings and queens, a place where pyramids once dominated the horizon, and one of the most remarkable lost chapters in African history. The mountain filled with thousands of human bones. Deep within the mountains of northern Spain lies a cave that has forced scientists to rethink what it means to be human. A cave filled with ancient bones, thousands of them, the remains of individuals who lived tens of thousands of years ago, people whose lives unfolded long before recorded history, and whose deaths left behind one of the most remarkable archaeological discoveries ever made. This place is known as El Sidron Cave, and hidden within its dark chambers are the remains of an entire group of Neanderthals, a discovery that transformed our understanding of humanity's closest extinct relatives. The cave sits in the Asturias region of Spain, surrounded by forests, hills, and rugged landscapes. From the outside, it appears unremarkable, a simple opening in the earth. Nothing about it suggests that one of the world's most important prehistoric discoveries lies within. Yet deep inside the cave system, archaeologists uncovered something extraordinary. Thousands of human bones scattered throughout the darkness. The remains belonged not to modern humans, but to Neanderthals. For generations, Neanderthals were portrayed as primitive creatures, brutish, simple, barely capable of complex thought. El Cedron helped challenge that image, because the bones revealed a much more complicated story. The remains date back roughly 49,000 years. During a time when Neanderthals occupied large parts of Europe, researchers eventually identified at least a dozen individuals within the cave: men, women, children. An entire family group preserved by chance for tens of thousands of years. One of the most fascinating aspects of the discovery is how much scientists learned from the bones. Advances in DNA analysis allowed researchers to study genetic material extracted from the remains. The results were astonishing. Scientists discovered evidence that some individuals were closely related: brothers, sisters, parents, children. For the first time, researchers could begin reconstructing the social structure of a Neanderthal family. It was an unprecedented glimpse into their world. The discoveries suggested strong family bonds, cooperation, and social relationships that looked surprisingly familiar. Far from being isolated individuals wandering through prehistoric landscapes, these people lived as part of closely connected groups. They cared for one another, raised children together, and survived in a challenging environment through cooperation. The cave also revealed evidence of daily life. Researchers studied teeth, bones, and chemical traces left behind by the individuals. The findings suggested diets rich in plants, nuts, and occasional meat. This challenged older assumptions that Neanderthals depended almost entirely on hunting. Their lives appear to have been more diverse and adaptable than once believed, yet the greatest mystery involves how the bones arrived in the cave. Many of the remains display unusual marks, cuts, fractures, patterns of damage that have generated decades of debate. Some researchers argue the evidence points toward cannibalism. According to this interpretation, the bodies were processed in ways similar to animal remains found at the site. If true, the discovery would provide rare evidence of a tragic event in Neanderthal history. Others caution that interpreting the evidence is complicated. The exact circumstances remain uncertain. The cave preserves clues, not certainty. Whatever happened, something catastrophic seems to have occurred. An entire group ended up inside the cave, and their remains remained there for nearly 50,000 years. The darkness protected them. Layer after layer of sediment covered the bones. The outside world changed completely. Ice ages came and went. Modern humans spread across Europe. Civilizations rose and fell. Yet inside El Cedron the evidence remained untouched, waiting, silent, preserved by time. One reason the discovery is so important is that it humanizes the Neanderthals. The individuals found here were not archaeological specimens when they were alive. They were people. They had families, relationships, memories, fears, and hopes. The cave allows us to see them not as an extinct species, but as fellow humans navigating a difficult world. Today, El Cedron remains one of the most significant Neanderthal sites ever discovered, not because of treasure, not because of monuments, but because it preserves a rare and intimate glimpse into lives lived tens of thousands of years ago. Deep inside a mountain cave lay thousands of ancient bones, the remains of a lost family, a forgotten chapter of human history, and one of the most extraordinary discoveries ever made about our ancient relatives. The giant stone tomb built for someone we still cannot identify. More than 5,000 years ago, long before the pyramids of Egypt rose above the desert, people in Ireland built a monument so extraordinary that it continues to puzzle archaeologists today. A massive stone tomb, a carefully engineered passageway, and a chamber aligned so precisely that sunlight enters it for only a brief moment each year. Who built it? Why was it built? And most importantly, who was important enough to be buried inside? Those questions remain unanswered. The monument is known as Newgrange, and it is one of the greatest mysteries of the ancient world. Located in the Boyne Valley of Eastern Ireland, Newgrange dominates the landscape. From a distance, it appears as a giant grassy mound rising from the countryside. But beneath that mound lies an astonishing feat of prehistoric engineering. The structure measures more than 80 meters across and contains hundreds of thousands of tons of stone and earth. Its builders transported massive stones from distant locations. Some came from mountains many kilometers away. Others were carried from coastal regions. The effort required would have been enormous. Yet somehow, more than 5,000 years ago, people completed the project without metal tools, wheels, or modern machinery. For centuries, the monument remained hidden beneath the landscape. Its original purpose was forgotten. Ancient legends surrounded the site. Some believed it was the home of supernatural beings. Others connected it to forgotten kings and heroes. The truth was far older than anyone imagined. When archaeologists began studying Newgrange, they discovered a narrow passage leading deep into the mound. The corridor stretches more than 19 metres before reaching a central chamber. Huge stone slabs form the walls. Massive roof stones protect the interior. Remarkably, the chamber has remained dry for thousands of years despite Ireland's wet climate. The engineering is so effective that modern builders still admire its design. Yet the greatest mystery lies in the monument's alignment. Every year during the winter solstice, something extraordinary happens. As the sun rises on the shortest day of the year, a beam of sunlight enters a specially designed opening above the entrance. The light slowly travels down the passage. Then, for a few brief minutes, it illuminates the central chamber deep inside the tomb. The event is breathtaking, and it could not have happened by accident. The builders understood astronomy with astonishing precision. They designed the monument to interact with the sun itself. Why? No one knows for certain. Some researchers believe the alignment symbolized rebirth. Others connect it to religious ceremonies. Perhaps it represented a journey from darkness into light. The people who built Newgrange left no written explanation. Only the monument remains. Excavations revealed human remains within the chamber, fragments of cremated bone, evidence that the site was used for burial, but surprisingly little survived. The identity of the individuals remains unknown. Were they kings, priests, rulers, important ancestors, or members of a select group whose status has been forgotten? The answers disappeared thousands of years ago. One of the most fascinating aspects of Newgrange is the artwork carved into its stones. Spirals, geometric designs, mysterious symbols. Some of the carvings are among the oldest examples of monumental art in Europe. Their meanings remain debated. Researchers have proposed countless interpretations: astronomy, religion, cycles of life and death. The carvings refuse to reveal their secrets completely. Like the monument itself, they remain partly mysterious. The scale of construction also raises important questions. Building Newgrange required planning, leadership, and cooperation on a massive level. Hundreds, perhaps thousands of people may have participated. The monument suggests a sophisticated society capable of organising enormous projects, far more sophisticated than many once imagined. Eventually, the culture that built Newgrange changed. Generations passed. New traditions emerged. The original purpose of the monument faded from memory. The tomb survived. But the stories behind it were lost. For thousands of years, the giant mound stood silently in the Irish countryside, watching history unfold around it. Today, Newgrange is recognised as one of the most important prehistoric monuments on Earth. Not because of treasure, not because of warfare, but because it reveals the intelligence, creativity, and ambition of people who lived 5 millennia ago. A giant stone tomb built for someone we still cannot identify. A monument aligned with the winter sun, and one of humanity's greatest archaeological mysteries, standing silently in Ireland for more than 5,000 years. The ancient temple, hidden inside a mountain pass. Deep in the highlands of central Turkey stands a monument unlike anything else in the ancient world. A giant stone facade carved directly into the side of a rocky hillside, covered with mysterious geometric designs, towering above the surrounding landscape, and connected to a king whose legend became one of the most famous stories of antiquity. For centuries, travellers looked upon this monument and wondered the same thing. Was it a temple, a tomb, a sacred gateway, or something entirely different? Today, it is known as the Midas Monument, and despite more than a century of study, many of its secrets remain unsolved. The monument stands within the ancient region of Phrygia, a rugged land of valleys, cliffs, and mountain passes located in what is now central Turkey. Thousands of years ago, this region was home to the Phrygians, a powerful civilization that emerged after the collapse of several Bronze Age kingdoms. They built cities, controlled trade routes, and developed a culture that would later become famous throughout the ancient Mediterranean. Most people know the Phrygians because of one legendary ruler, King Midas, the king who, according to Greek mythology, could turn everything he touched into gold. Whether the real Midas inspired the legend remains uncertain, but his name became forever linked to this remarkable monument. At first glance, the structure appears almost impossible. The facade rises more than 17 metres high. Its surface is covered with intricate geometric patterns carved directly into the rock. The designs create the illusion of a giant woven tapestry frozen in stone. Unlike temples built from blocks, the entire monument was cut from a single rock formation. The precision is extraordinary. Even today, visitors struggle to understand how ancient craftsmen achieved such accuracy. One of the greatest mysteries involves its purpose. For many years, researchers believed it was a tomb for King Midas himself. The monument certainly looks important enough. A large niche occupies the centre of the facade, suggesting that a sacred object or statue may once have stood there. Yet no burial chamber has ever been found behind the monument. No king rests inside. No treasure has been discovered. The structure remains strangely empty. That mystery has fueled decades of debate. Some archaeologists now believe it functioned as a religious monument dedicated to a goddess rather than a king. The Phrygians worshipped powerful deities associated with nature, fertility, and the mountains. The monument may have served as a sacred sanctuary where rituals were performed in the open air. If true, the giant stone facade was never intended to hide a tomb at all. It was intended to impress worshippers, to create a visible connection between the human world and the divine. The location adds another layer to the mystery. The monument stands within a landscape filled with rock-cut structures, hidden passages, and ancient settlements. Throughout the surrounding valleys, the Phrygians carved chambers, altars, and monuments directly into the stone. The entire region feels like a giant sacred landscape, a place where religion and nature became inseparable. One of the most fascinating aspects of the Midas monument is its survival. Empires rose and fell around it. The Persians conquered the region. Then the armies of Alexander the Great arrived. Romans followed. Byzantines followed them. Yet the monument remained, silent and unchanged, watching centuries of history unfold across the mountain pass. The carvings themselves continue to puzzle researchers. Their geometric patterns are unlike anything found elsewhere in the ancient world. Some scholars believe the designs carried symbolic meaning. Others think they may have represented architectural features from wooden structures now lost to time. No definitive explanation exists. Like so much of Phrygian culture, the answers disappeared long ago. Archaeologists have uncovered inscriptions near the monument that mention Midas by name. These inscriptions provide one of the strongest links between the site and the legendary ruler. Yet even here, certainty remains elusive. The real King Midas remains a shadowy figure, part history, part legend. His life is obscured by centuries of storytelling. The monument bearing his name reflects that same uncertainty. A structure standing between fact and myth. Eventually the Phrygian kingdom declined. New powers controlled Anatolia. Ancient traditions faded. The purpose of the monument was forgotten. For more than 2,000 years, it stood alone among the rocks, a giant stone puzzle waiting to be understood. Today, the Midas monument remains one of Turkey's most fascinating archaeological sites, not because of treasure, not because of conquest, but because it preserves the mystery of an entire civilization, a civilization that carved its beliefs directly into the mountains. Hidden inside a mountain pass stands an ancient temple of stone, a monument linked to a legendary king, a masterpiece of ancient engineering, and one of the greatest unsolved mysteries of the ancient world, the forgotten temple discovered under desert sand. Deep within Egypt's western desert stands a temple that vanished beneath the sand for centuries, a temple built far from the Nile, far from the Great Pyramids, and far from the ancient cities most people associate with Egypt. For generations, the desert slowly buried its walls, wind covered its carvings, sand swallowed its courtyards, until eventually the temple disappeared from sight altogether. Then archaeologists uncovered it once again, revealing one of the best preserved temples from ancient Egypt's later history. This remarkable monument is known as the Temple of Hebes, and its survival offers an extraordinary glimpse into a forgotten chapter of the ancient world. The temple stands within the Karga oasis, one of several fertile oases scattered across Egypt's vast western desert. Today, the landscape appears isolated. Endless desert stretches toward the horizon. Rock formations rise from the sand. Small pockets of green mark the presence of precious water. Yet for thousands of years, these oases served as lifelines for travellers crossing some of the harshest environments on Earth. Trade routes passed through them. Caravans stopped here. Civilizations depended upon them. The Temple of Hebes emerged from that world. Construction began during a fascinating period of Egyptian history. At the time, Egypt was experiencing foreign rule under the Persian Empire. Yet despite political changes, traditional Egyptian religion remained powerful. Kings and officials continued building temples dedicated to ancient gods. The Temple of Hebes became one of the finest examples of that tradition. Dedicated primarily to the god Amun, the complex was designed to honour the divine forces believed to govern the universe. At first glance, the temple appears surprisingly complete. Massive stone walls still stand. Columns remain upright. Carvings cover many surfaces. Unlike numerous ancient sites damaged by time, war, or extensive rebuilding, Hebes survived in remarkable condition. Ironically, the desert itself may have helped preserve it. The same sand that hid the temple from view also protected it from destruction. For centuries, drifting dunes sealed parts of the structure beneath a natural protective layer. When archaeologists finally began clearing the site, they encountered a monument that had escaped much of the damage suffered elsewhere. The discoveries were extraordinary. Detailed reliefs decorated the walls. Ancient inscriptions survived. Images of gods, pharaohs, and sacred rituals appeared exactly where artists carved them more than 2,000 years ago. For historians, the temple became a priceless record of religious life, during a period often overshadowed by earlier Egyptian dynasties. One of the most fascinating features is the artwork itself. The carvings display traditional Egyptian religious scenes with remarkable detail. Amun appears repeatedly. Other gods and goddesses fill the walls, ceremonies unfold in stone, offerings are presented, prayers are recorded. Together, the images create a visual story of belief, power, and divine order. Walking through the temple today feels almost like entering an ancient religious text. Every wall contains another chapter, every carving preserves another fragment of history. The temple also reveals how connected Egypt remained to the wider world. Persian rulers governed the country during part of its construction. Yet Egyptian traditions endured. The monument demonstrates how cultures can adapt while preserving their identity. Foreign powers came and went. The gods of Egypt remained. That resilience is carved into every stone of Hebes. One mystery continues to intrigue archaeologists. How much of the surrounding ancient settlement remains buried beneath the desert? The temple was not isolated. People lived nearby. Priests worked here. Travellers passed through the oasis. Yet much of that world remains hidden beneath sand and time. Excavations continue revealing new pieces of the story. The desert has not surrendered all its secrets. Eventually, ancient religious traditions faded. New beliefs spread across Egypt. The temple's ceremonies ended, its priests disappeared, the sacred halls fell silent. Then came centuries of abandonment. Wind carried sand across the landscape. Dunes formed around the walls. The monument slowly vanished from sight. For generations, few people knew it existed. The desert nearly erased it completely, but not quite. Today, the Temple of Hebes stands as one of the most remarkable surviving temples in Egypt. Not because of treasure, not because of famous battles, but because it preserves a forgotten moment in history with extraordinary clarity. A temple hidden beneath desert sand, a sanctuary rescued from oblivion, and one of the most fascinating archaeological rediscoveries ever made in the Egyptian desert. For centuries it slept beneath the dunes, waiting for the desert to reveal it once more.